time to jump into Mexico.
A lot of people call Cozumel Diver's Paradise.
We're doing things. We're ready.
Whenever we go diving as a group, we're ambassadors for Nova Scotia. We're also ambassadors for lady divers.
You can take the girls out of Nova Scotia, but you can't take Nova Scotia out of the girls.
I love diving wrecks.
I turned around and there's this big white submarine coming past me.
It's kind of like diving into a hole in the middle of the earth. There's a little bit of a eerie feel. It feels like you're in a different world.
Cozumel is one of the diving hotspots in the world.
Torpedo Race has been around for 25 years, so they've always planned dive trips that people have enrolled in every year. Lucky for us, one of our best friends is the manager at Torpedo Race, and so I think April took it upon herself to plan some epic trips for all of us to go on this year.
We had 24 people from Nova Scotia head down to Cozumel, so a good-sized crew, a good size of Maritimers hit up Cozumel.
I mean, when you bring the group of us around, like we definitely bring Nova Scotia anywhere we go.
Basket mouth. We are ready. I'm pumped.
I think people are really aware that there's a lot of shipwrecks around Nova Scotia. When they think of the North Atlantic, they think of really rugged coastlines and rough seas and a lot of history.
I love diving shipwrecks. It kind of puts you into the past history to see something that happened long ago.
Another day, another dive.
Yeah.
We started the day getting to dive a shipwreck.
And I do love wreck dives because you can do treasure hunting there normally.
It was fully intact, sitting right up and down, which is cool to see. It wasn't on its side at all.
This was a surveying ship that was owned by the American government, and they actually sold it to the Mexican government, I believe in the 90s or so. The Mexican government decided to sink this boat as an artificial reef in June of 2000. And so this ship is 184 feet long, and they set it up for diving. So basically, all of the sharp bits and bobs are removed, and it's completely set up, and there's a lot of open spaces to make it easier for divers to go through all sorts of cool swim-throughs.
I love diving wrecks, and this one in particular was really fun because they purposefully took all the dangly and sharp bits out of the wreck, so there are tons of easy entry swim-throughs for us to dive in. That was the most penetration I've ever done in a wreck, so it was really, really cool to see for sure.
It was the first time I've ever penetrated a shipwreck. They dive it all the time, so they knew it was intact enough that we could swim through the door frames and like through the little swim-through holes. And
Like a maze, you're going through the shipwreck, through the different rooms, through the engine room, through all of like these different levels. It was really, really interesting. And there was, at one point, we were in the boat, and there's this giant moray eel in the floorboards.
It was massive. I didn't even know they got that big. It was that big.
And you're just like in this tiny space with this huge thing, and I'm just like swimming away like, nope, nope, no, no thank you. some points it can be eerie for sure. I think if we didn't already know that it was sunk with the intention to be a dived wreck, like if it was just like a wreck that, you know, caught in a storm and now like it's just sitting there as it was when it went down, I think that would be a little bit more eerie. It's really cool to kind of like see all of the different like rooms and what they could be used for, and kind of imagine what it was like before it was sitting on the bottom of the ocean. There would be these patches of light coming through the windows with these schools of tiny little fish. So it would be this ray of light, all these fishes, and then, I don't know, it was like beautiful. It was really cool because I could always just find the light.
Just phenomenal, a really cool wreck.
The dives are a lot of fun. It gets a little bit boring for the last 3 minutes of our dive while we do our safety stops at 15 feet. You're kind of just sitting there, sometimes counting on your dive watch, or maybe watching some of the fish float by, or playing like patty cake or something stupid with your dive buddies just to pass the time.
When we were coming out to do our safety stop, I turned around and there's this big white submarine coming past me. I was like, well, this is just bananas. Like, this is crazy.
We saw the Atlantis submarine, which is usually docked on the coast of Cozumel, kind of in port in the town. They do daily tours for tourists to go see the wreck, the C-53 that we went on. We heard it. It was an electric boat, so we heard it before we saw it. We were kind of whipping our heads around because we had known that the submarine was close by. So thankfully we had the opportunity to actually see it. We all waved to the tourists on the boat. We were slightly too far away to see them, but I'm sure they could see us. And they were probably excited, just as excited maybe, to see some divers underwater.
It's interesting to think what the people inside the submarine must think. And, you know, are they looking out that little porthole thinking, look at those divers, they're crazy? Because that's what I think about the people on the submarine. I'd be more scared on that submarine than I am diving.
But yeah, it was really cool. It made the safety stop a lot more fun because you're just sitting there for 3 minutes like, okay, just waiting, anytime, ready to go up. But you don't want to rise too fast. So we're just sitting there and like, do, and then submarine. So it made it a lot more fun. And then you'd come into this big opening and like you can see just tree roots that go right down into the water.
It's so beautiful. Oh my goodness. And if it's this beautiful topside, I can't imagine what it's gonna look like underwater.
It's different than any dive we've ever done. You can hardly see like my hands in front of me. If you go to Mexico and you're a diver, you know that you want to check out a cenote at least once just to see what it's all about. We're going to be pretend cave divers for the day. I think this is the first time for a lot of people getting in the cenote, so it's a lot different than the other diving that most of us have done. So it's kind of a cool way to switch it up a little bit. It's kind of like diving into a hole in the middle of the earth. Like it's going to be really cool. I'm so excited.
So a cenote is essentially it's almost like a pond, but in it is little caves and caverns. So it's made out of limestone.
We visited some Mayan ruins and we learned a little bit about the history. And the ancient Mayans thought that these cenotes were essentially a passageway to the underworld. So they were actually considered very sacred.
The cenotes were used as like a really important like sacred ceremonial space for the ancient Mayans, and they also used it as like to sacrifice things and people. And I think that's part of the reason that archaeologists have found different bones and skeletal remains and such. So there's a little bit of a eerie feel. It kind of made me think of like, I was listening to a podcast about the catacombs in Paris. So it kind of reminded me of that in a way. There's a lot of human history down there. You might come across something spooky today.
I've seen lots of pictures and videos, and a few of our friends back home are big cave divers. So this will be like our introduction to caves.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we have to go on a bit of an adventure. It kind of feels like we're packing up and leaving this place, even though it's only for the day. But we're all packing our gear. We're gonna taxi over to the ferry, take a 45-minute ferry ride over to mainland, and then get a van of some sort to motor us over to the cenotes.
We're en route. En route to the cenotes.
Yeah.
Hopefully we make the 9 o'clock ferry.
And the cool thing about cenotes is they're just these little spots in the middle of like the jungle, I guess. They're definitely used by divers frequently and like tourists, but it's still pretty rustic when you get in there. Just a wooden shack in the middle of nowhere. We're throwing on the gear, we've got a tent, we've got our weights on, and then you have a good stroll to the water. From the place where we're gearing up. So you're kind of like walking down the steps, walking along like a boardwalk, and yeah, it's a bit of a hike. We're used to that in Nova Scotia. Like some of the dive sites, you do need to do a bit more of a hike.
You come into this big opening, and like you can see just tree roots that go right down into the water, and you can see these big, like, I don't even know what kind of trees they are, jungle trees, like a rainforest almost.
It's so beautiful. Oh my goodness. And if it's this beautiful topside, I can't imagine what it's gonna look like underwater.
When you first get to the cenotes, you feel like almost like a sense of calm, because you're in an environment where there's jungle, it's just peaceful, natural creatures like lizards and iguanas and things like that. This just beautiful cavern. And when you walk in, you almost just feel like it's like a kind of moment, right? It's like you just feel really calm and chill. And I think like I can see why it would be perceived as a very spiritual place in a Mayan culture. I feel that when I walk up to it, I'm pretty in tune with like nature and the environment and things like that. So I can see how, for those people in particular in that culture, why they would think that was such a special place to go, and how there could be gods and things like that around that area. I could totally see it.
We're ready.
I've been waiting my whole life for this.
Yeah.
When we first got into the cenote, it's different than any dive we've ever done.
So you actually pass through fresh water and go into salt water, which is really cool. So the fresh water is colder, then you pass through the hydrocline and everything goes blurry, and it's almost like the consistency of oil. And then when you get into the salt water, it's warmer.
It almost feels like your eyes are going blurry, because you go from seeing everything crystal clear, perfect, to like, I can hardly see like my hands in front of me, like, or at least they look like super weird. but and then you go down or you keep going, and then everything is like clear again.
You might not even know you're in water. It is that clear. So it was just a really cool experience. You're surrounded by this limestone, going through these little channels and caverns. We all had our lights. We're like single file going through, and I just had almost a little aha moment while I was down there of like, this is something I've always wanted to do, and I've been working hard to have good buoyancy, good trim to be down here, and I'm finally doing it.
When you go through and you start diving down deeper and deeper and deeper, it does start to get darker, but you can actually see a bunch of fossils that get pointed out. So I saw some shells, there was honeycomb, there's insects. These are all fossilized into the rock, so the guide would point them out. And then there were some tighter spaces that you would have to go through, like you were almost cave diving. And then you would come up into this open area, so you'd pop up, and up above you would be some bats living into some of the little holes inside of the cenote. You would look out, and it would be like big tree roots just coming down into the water, and like the tree is humongous, it's outdoors. And my favorite part was when I was coming up into like this open area, I could see other divers up there, and I could see their fins. And it would just look like this teal with like this blue shadow as you're filming. Like, it was amazing. It was really cool because it's millions and millions and millions of years old.
It feels like you're in a different world. Like it's so cool.
It's almost like the darkness just blocks out all of the noise that's going on around you in your head. When you're in a cenote, it's almost like an enclosed cavern where you just go and all you can focus on is purely diving. You can't focus on anything else. All the thoughts that you have about work or if you're in school or your personal life, they just go out the window.
So nice.
Oh, beautiful.
So clear, too.
The lights at the end, huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. I was like, this is the best thing ever. I want to stay here all the time.
I kind of felt like cenotes was something I had been working towards in my diving for a long time. So to finally get to dive in the cenotes felt really, really good, and it was really exciting. And it definitely lit a little fire in me to do a little more of that.
Oh my God, it was beautiful. I felt like I was in another planet. It was very meditative. Like Elena and I were just saying, it was so relaxing. We thought, you think of cave diving, you think, oh my gosh, it's a little dark and scary. And obviously this was no cave, but it wasn't scary at all. It was beautiful.
It was definitely dark, but no spooky vibes. I mean, this is a pretty well-explored cenote. I'm sure some of the lesser explored ones that are really dark can be quite scary, but this was awesome.
Yeah, I kept like shining my light too on the ceiling too.
Yeah.
Just to be like, wow. You're in an overhead environment.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
It was more enclosed than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be more open and very bright, but we were fully in there.
We were right in there.
Cave diving is a cool thing, but it's definitely something that you need a lot of training for. It's a whole different beast.
Cenote is essentially a baby cave. So maybe one day we'll get into cave diving. But a big thing with cave diving is you have to have really good buoyancy and you have to have really good trim. You have to have a really good frog kick. So there's all these little skills that you have to have in order to be a cave diver and basically get through the cave safely. So all these little things, we work really hard on even when we're diving here in Nova Scotia, like, oh, how is my trim? Do I look good in the water? Am I nice and streamlined? All these little things that since I've been a diver, I've been thinking about. Finally, it's like you're applying these skills in a place where it actually matters. I think no matter where you travel, you relate to each other. Some of the cave divers in Mexico, they heard about me being an ice instructor. And they're like, what? You dive under the ice? And I'm like, you dive in caves. So it's just comparing. It's like something that seems crazy to me, like diving in caves. You know, it's not crazy to them, but me diving under the ice is absolutely insane. So there was so much that we could relate on, which is kind of cool when you think, you know, Nova Scotia to Mexico, but it's not all that different.
Our dive community in Nova Scotia is really, really tight.
I think it's like any hobby or passion that people have. I think it brings people from different walks of life together, people of different ages and occupations and ethnicities and genders. We all kind of unite over our common kind of love of the ocean and our kind of sense of love for adrenaline and going on these crazy adventures.
I think that actually builds the bond and strengthens our dive culture in Nova Scotia, because now we can come back and we can say, hey, this is how our group was, and now we can book another trip and bring more divers from Nova Scotia to experience what we're experiencing.
I think scuba diving and travel are kind of hand in hand with a lot of us. Going on these dive trips allows us to experience different places and cultures that we wouldn't get to experience otherwise, because even though we dive at home all the time in our own backyards, which none of us would trade for the world, it's really nice to have scuba diving as like our home base at home, but that's kind of the doorway that allows us to experience all these different places.
A lot of people are really intrigued with the idea of diving in Nova Scotia when we talk to them about it, because it's not their first thought. They don't think, oh, I want to go dive in Nova Scotia, because they don't think there's a lot of diving around here until they're educated about what we do have. We have the shipwrecks, we have the sea life. So there are a lot of things and opportunities that you can do in Nova Scotia and that you can experience diving. But the education piece is lacking, and with Torpedo Rays and with April really building up the culture of diving in a younger community, I think that knowledge is now starting to be spread, and people are going, oh. So they're starting to recognize these things, and it's starting to put Nova Scotia more on the map for a dive community.
I feel like when you go on a trip like this, it just motivates everybody to keep diving, and it makes the whole group super close-knit.
Nova Scotia is our home. It's what we do, and we just really go from there. It's just where we expand from, really.
And it just makes everybody want to dive more at home, right? Like, you get off a trip diving, 2-3 times a day, and you get home, you just want to keep diving, even if it's in cold water.
I know this trip to Mexico has been so amazing, but I just can't wait to see what's going to happen next.